You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 272. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? Here is today's big question. When is the last time that you have found yourself feeling super stuck or frustrated? You're in this space where you know there is something that you want to do or need to do, but no matter what you try, you just cannot seem to get started. You can feel that weight of the thing. It's just hanging over you. And every time you think about it, there's this wave of resistance, this push-pull that washes over you. You know you want to get it done. And also, no matter what you try, you can't seem to move forward. And let's be honest, we all know this resistance, right? It is so very uncomfortable, and we all know it so well. But also, here's the truth, and it's such an annoying truth. Okay, avoiding this task, putting it off, it doesn't actually solve the problem either, right? It may get us away from the resistance for a minute, but it doesn't actually solve the problem, because even though we're not doing the thing in the moment, so we kind of relieve some of that discomfort, we're still stuck in the discomfort of knowing the thing is sitting there waiting for us. We know it is there on the back burner saying, when are you going to get this done? I'm still sitting here waiting, right? So in other words, on the one hand, doing the task, actually leaning in and doing the thing feels hard. And then on the other hand, not leaning in, not doing the task also feels hard. Okay, so the truth is we need to choose our discomfort. I'm telling you, this is kind of an annoying episode, but it is different truths that I think are so helpful for us to hear. And that's what I want to talk about today. Okay, which challenge are we going to take? If you're going to feel frustrated, restless, resistant, confused, either way, doing the thing or not doing the thing, if you're going to feel it either way, which option are you willing to take? If you're going to feel those feelings avoiding the task, and if you're going to feel a similar platter of feelings doing the task, which option will you take? Now, this may seem like an intellectually obvious answer. When the toddler brain is not throwing a tantrum, our intellectual brain is like, duh, of course I'll do the thing that moves me forward. Okay, but the actual answer isn't always so black and white. It's not always so obvious and easy. Otherwise, we'd be doing it every time, okay? So how do we know when it's time to lean in and do the hard thing versus when we actually want to intentionally postpone the hard thing for later? Okay, that's one question that I want to look at. And also building on that, when we do know it's time to lean in and do the hard thing, how do we do it? Okay, so here's the thing that I first want to highlight in this episode. Sometimes our executive functions just don't show up. You hear me say this pretty often on this podcast, right? Sometimes our executive functions just don't show up to work. You know how these days feel, right? It's like no matter what you do, no matter how much you push yourself, no matter how much you motivate yourself, there's just no gas in the tank, okay? And that's not about resistance. That's not about I just don't want to energy. This is about capacity. In those moments, it's about capacity when we literally don't have battery in the phone, right? We don't have gas in the tank, whatever analogy you want to use. It's in these moments that it's so important to learn how to honor our capacity, honor that reality. Because there's a very big and important difference between truly not having the capacity and not being open to or willing to lean in to the discomfort of the hard thing. Now, as I'm saying this, I feel like I need to make my probably monthly disclaimer that we never use the tools on this podcast against ourselves. Okay, this could be one where we start shaming ourselves, saying, oh, well, I'm probably just not willing. I should probably be more willing to be in the discomfort. No. Okay, we're not going to turn this and flip this against ourselves. There are times when we truly don't have capacity, and there's an art in learning, whether it's a capacity thing or whether it's a feeling thing. Okay, knowing the difference, that's where the key is. Because sometimes we genuinely don't have the energy, the focus, the resources we need to do the thing. Our executive functions, right? That part of our brain that helps us to plan and prioritize and initiate tasks and follow through. It's just not firing on all cylinders. And when that happens, it's so important to give ourselves that permission to step back, to recharge, to come back with a full tank. Okay? That's not avoidance. That's not procrastination. That is honoring your capacity. And it's a critical component, especially for the listeners of the Busy Awesome community. I know you. I know you. And what we try and do is suck up all the fumes from the gas tank and try and keep going when there's nothing left. So please, please, please don't use this against yourself. And remember, there are both options here. We have times when we don't have capacity. And then also there are times when the toddler brain might be throwing a tantrum. There are times when the resistance is more about avoiding an experience of discomfort. Again, I tend to think about it as a toddler tantrum energy, maybe even a teenager tantrum energy of, I don't wanna, this is hard, I just don't want to. And this energy tends to come with maybe doing something unfamiliar, something hard, something that asks us to put ourselves out there. Okay? In these situations, leaning into the discomfort and taking action is actually what moves us forward. Both situations can help move us forward. When we're past our capacity, resting is what ultimately allows us to move forward because we can recharge our battery or fill up our tank. But in the times when it's more of a resistance, it's a leaning into the discomfort that helps us grow and move forward. So how do we tell the difference here? How do we know the difference between these two? How do we know if it's a genuine capacity thing or if there's an avoidance of discomfort? Well, here's how I like to think about it, okay? As I mentioned, we have this sort of, I don't want to energy. I don't wanna, that feeling of resistance, this strong resistance. It's like our toddler brain is throwing a tantrum. And you probably know what I mean when I'm saying this. If you have kids or you have nieces or nephews or you've watched children before, you know this tantrum, okay? It's like this inner voice is stamping its foot and crossing its arms. And it's like, I don't want to. I don't want to do this. You can't make me, okay? And it's this resistance, not because we can't do it, but more because it's uncomfortable or it feels a little bit scary or it's not immediately gratifying. So why would I want to do it? That's kind of boring. Okay. Just like a real toddler who doesn't want to leave the playground, our mind can really throw a fit when we're asking it to do something that's not immediately fun. I'm thinking about my niece right now and being at the pool and then needing to go back and like take a bath and get ready for bed. Of course, there will be a tantrum of some sort. No one wants to leave a pool and have to go get ready for bed when you're 5. I might want to, but not when I'm 5, okay? It's the same for our brain. When our brain is faced with tasks that require effort or focus or take us out of our comfort zone or our fun zone, we, just like a toddler, tend to feel quite a bit of resistance, okay? And so we want to meet this resistance with a combination of both compassion and a bit of gentle parenting. So, no, this is what we're doing. So again, it's first and foremost important to recognize whether we're dealing with that genuine lack of capacity or more of a toddler tantrum situation, okay? So how might we know if it's a capacity issue? Well, maybe we are physically exhausted, or we're burnt out, or our executive functions are just offline. It feels foggy. You're trying to think through things and it's not computing. Maybe we've been going nonstop and our brain or our body or both are just signaling, clearly, I need rest. Okay. In these moments, it's so important. It's essential to honor that need for rest, because actually pushing through and forcing yourself to keep going can do much more harm than good. That's what fuels burnout. A toddler tantrum, on the other hand, that I don't want to energy is often presented without any type of depletion behind it. Okay. It's much more of this resistance to the discomfort. You still have the energy. You still have the capacity. Your brain can actually come up with some pretty clever reasons why it's not a good time or whatever. Your brain is actually firing on all cylinders. But it's this resistance to feeling uncomfortable, right? The toddler is in charge here. Now, if you are truly tapped out, if you are truly depleted and it's a capacity issue, again, I would offer that it is necessary to rest and not push yourself through. That's what will actually help you keep showing up in the way that you want to in the long run. And to help myself check in and know the difference, I love to ask myself, okay, hold on. Am I physically exhausted or am I mentally exhausted? Does it feel foggy right now? Have I been pushing myself really hard lately? When's the last time I've had a break? Have I been checking in with those 7 different types of rest like we talked about several episodes ago? I'll link to it in the show notes. I don't remember the episode number. But remember, we have lots of different types of rest. Have I been tending to those? Is my ability to focus right now due to external stressors, a lack of rest? What's going on? A question I especially love to ask is, what would I offer to my best friend or a client who is navigating the same situation? Would I encourage them to lean in and do the thing? Come on, we can do this. Let's break down the steps. Or would I say, you know what? I think you need a break here. It makes sense. You're a bit overextended. I think it's time to rest. What would I tell my best friend or a client? Usually that's what I need for myself. So if you find yourself genuinely depleted, again, the most productive thing you can do is rest and recharge that battery. Now, what about the latter? What about when it is a toddler tantrum or a teenage tantrum? Maybe the brain doesn't want to do the thing because it feels really boring and it's just kind of dreading it. Or the task feels unfamiliar, so it feels a little bit scary or intimidating. Maybe the brain is resistant because you're going to have to put yourself out there and get some feedback. And there's a potential for negative feedback or critique. Maybe the brain is overwhelmed thinking about all of the steps. Whatever the reason, okay, if we tap in and we know, no, hold on, I do actually have the capacity. I have the energy. My brain is getting very creative in all the reasons why I shouldn't do this, but that's probably a sign that I have the capacity for it. If it's more of a resistance to doing the hard thing, how do we support ourselves here? Okay, what do we do in this situation? When we are more about the resistance of discomfort rather than lacking capacity, I think it can be helpful to first think about discomfort through 2 lenses. Okay, there's kind of 2 different types of discomfort that we're dealing with in situations like this. On the one side, we've got the short-term relief that comes with avoidance. So we think about doing something and we just dread it. It's going to be boring. It's going to be hard. We're intimidated, whatever. It can feel so good in the moment to just avoid the thing. When we decide, you know what, I'm just not going to do that right now. There's plenty of time tomorrow. I'll get to that next week. I'll do that later. Okay? That feeling of relief, that, I don't have to think about it anymore. It feels so good in the moment. But here's the thing, that relief is incredibly temporary. For myself, it might be 10 seconds of relief because immediately after, and this timing is different for everybody, but at some point after, that relief from not doing the task quickly spins into greater dread anxiety, that gnawing sense of knowing the task is still there waiting for us to do it. The more we avoid it, the more that emotional experience compounds, right? That's where the task starts taking up even more mental space. In fact, it often makes the idea of doing the thing even more intimidating, even more overwhelming. So that's one side of discomfort. We have short-term relief, but then long-term avoidance and discomfort and pain. Now, on the other side, we have the hard, that discomfort of taking action in the moment. Okay, this is absolutely super uncomfortable as well. It requires effort. You have to lean in and get yourself into motion. Maybe you have to tackle something that you think you're not ready to do, or face that possibility of failure, whatever that means, quote unquote failure, or potentially receiving critique or negative feedback. But what's different here is that taking that action allows us to move forward toward a long-term payoff. Yes, it's super uncomfortable in the moment, but every step forward is one step closer to relief, toward the end goal. You get that satisfaction of progress. You get the experience of accomplishment. Even if it's one step in many, you're still seeing that progress. And with that, you're also freeing up the mental space to focus on other things or to focus on next steps. So yeah, both options are tough, okay? But one of those options leaves us spinning in circles, stuck in this mental loop of avoidance, while the other gets us closer to feeling that sense of relief, of accomplishment, of freedom. Now, here's where that power of choice comes in. We get to choose which flavor of discomfort we are willing to experience. Are we choosing the temporary relief that eventually leads to the long-term dread, long-term mental clutter, overwhelm? Or are we choosing the discomfort of action that, again, while absolutely challenging up front, results in the freedom and the accomplishment on the other side? I like to think of it as if you're standing at this fork in the road, okay? So both paths that you look at are a bit rocky, they're a bit uncomfortable, but one of them is a short climb. It's a pretty steep climb, but it's a short climb that leads to this beautiful view, okay? This sense of peace, this sense of clarity once you get to the top. And then the other, it might look easy at first. It's more flat, but it's actually quite long and windy. And it turns out that it's a loop that brings you right back to where you got started with no sense of relief or progress because it just looped you right back. And the choice is there every time. Are we going to take that steeper climb that brings us to the beautiful view and clarity of what's next? Or are we going to stay on that loop that looks a little bit easier at first, but it's actually quite treacherous in looping us around and around and around? Okay, so we've talked about the most glaring considerations when it comes to choosing your discomfort. We have the discomfort of doing the thing versus the discomfort of staying stuck, if we kind of make it down to the very basics. But there's something else that I want us to consider as well, because every time we decide to put off the task, we're not only just avoiding it, we're actually compounding the discomfort. Okay? The more that we put off that thing, the more the dread compounds, and it makes that task seem even more challenging. Because here's the thing, the task itself, that hasn't changed. Let's say you're sending an email or you're finishing up a report or you're tidying up your space, whatever. That task remains the same. But you have all been here, I'm guessing. I certainly have many times. What does change is our emotional and mental load around it. Because every time we put the thing off, there's that low level of discomfort of not doing the thing that grows a little bit bigger, gets a little bit heavier. It goes from slight discomfort or annoyance then into maybe dread. And then that dread starts to take up even more mental real estate. And suddenly we're not just thinking about the task, but now we're thinking about, oh, I should have already done this. I can't believe I put it off. I've done it again. Oh, now it's hanging over my head and this person's waiting on this. And now we just have so much dread alongside the actual discomfort of doing the thing. So what started as this little bit of discomfort turns into this overwhelming sense that the task is so much harder than it was when we started, when we first thought about it. So again, let's say it's an email. Let's say I have an email that I have been putting off responding to. And initially it feels like this small weight on my shoulders. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do this. There's a lot of questions. I don't know how to answer all of them. I'll get to this later. I'll do it tomorrow. Okay. Mark it as a red. I'll do it tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and goes and my day gets busy. And now it's been a couple of days. And each time I see that unread message in my inbox that I have not responded to, it's starting to feel heavier. Okay. Now it's not just about replying to the email. It's also about me thinking that the other person is waiting on me and that I should have responded sooner. And now I'm layering on shame and guilt and maybe worry about how I'm going to reply and how I should apologize and how that delay might be perceived. And I have this growing anxiety around it. And now it's this big ball of emotion that I have to carry around. What started as maybe a 10-minute task has ballooned into something that feels like it's a day's worth of emotional work. Or maybe it's a project we've been avoiding. Okay. At first, it's just sort of that nagging thought. Ooh, I should get started on that. That's right. That due date's coming up. Okay. But then the days go by. The project starts to loom larger in your mind. The due date gets closer, becomes more daunting. But again, not because the project has actually changed. What has changed is all the dread that we've built up in our mind surrounding it. We start ruminating. We start thinking about all of the different steps we need to take and how far we should be by now. And that task seems even heavier, even more challenging to face because we've been avoiding it. And that's why I'm always talking about taking even the smallest step by building our on-ramps and creating the smallest step. Because when we can get started a little bit sooner, rather than later, we're helping to stop that snowball of dread that ultimately makes our tasks seem insurmountable. Okay? When we can stop that buildup of dread before it gets out of control, it's incredibly powerful. And also, now this isn't always true, but also what I have found to be mostly true is that when I take that first step, I often find the task is not nearly as overwhelming or as terrible as my mind initially made it out to be. And what's more, I usually start to gain momentum, which makes continuing to move forward even easier. Because even if I'm only doing that small part of a task, I am moving forward. I am getting into motion. And an object in motion stays in motion. Now, here's my challenge for you this week. I invite you to start gathering awareness, gathering data of where you notice this resistance coming up. Okay? Because today what we've done is we've talked about these two different types of discomfort. We've talked about the discomfort of doing the task, doing the thing, versus the discomfort of staying stuck, of being in that resistance, of fighting the resistance. And we also explored how to recognize whether we are dealing with this genuine lack of capacity, where it's actually better to step back and rest, versus when it's more of a toddler tantrum. When our toddler is throwing a tantrum to avoid potential discomfort. And then building on that, we also dove into the compounding effect of dread and how avoiding the task, avoiding a thing, only makes that sense of dread and discomfort and resistance grow even larger in our minds. It's like we're putting more rocks into that backpack. And we're turning what might be a small challenge, a small bit of discomfort into something that is so emotionally heavy that it completely drains us. Okay. So what I invite you to do this week is to start noticing where you experience resistance most often. Is it at work when you're faced with big projects, or is it more of the small daily admin tasks? Is it at home when you see the laundry piling up, or it's time to meal prep or get groceries? Is it more around personal goals, exercising, journaling, meditating? Is it about scheduling appointments? Where do you notice your resistance come up most often? And as you notice these areas of resistance, check in with curiosity. Okay, we're leaving judgment out of this. Check in with curiosity. Is this about capacity? Am I feeling exhausted? Am I feeling depleted? Do I need some genuine rest here? Or is this more about resistance? Am I avoiding a bit of discomfort because I think it might feel really boring or scary or unfamiliar to do this thing? Okay, this week, I invite you to observe. You don't need to take action on any of it yet, okay? Bring some awareness to these patterns. Awareness is the first and most important step in any type of growth. So we want to bring awareness here first. And then next week, in episode 273, we're going to dive deeper into this topic with specific questions that you can ask yourself to help loosen this grip of resistance and create greater clarity on what you need to move out of it and into action. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been avoiding the hard things, be sure to tap the little subscribe button in your podcast player or on YouTube so you don't miss next week's episode, and then start building that awareness. Start growing your awareness around where the resistance is coming up, whether it's a capacity thing or a toddler tantrum thing, and that awareness is what we'll build on next week. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you want to take this work deeper, if you want support in both coaching your brain into leaning into the discomfort and knowing when it's a capacity and you want to rest, and also to learn actionable strategies and frameworks and supports that we can put in place to smooth out some of the friction so that taking action isn't quite as intense, let's talk. I work with clients both one-on-one and in small groups. And if you'd like to learn more about either option, head to the links in the show notes. You can read more, sign up for a time for us to chat on Zoom. We'll talk about where you're at and any obstacles you're facing. We'll talk through the goals you want to reach, and we'll create a roadmap to help you make that happen. And from there, we can decide whether coaching is a great fit to help you on that journey. So head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/coaching for all the details. Also, if you want to learn my step-by-step approach to lock in a routine and make it stick, be sure to grab my free course called the ADHD Routine Revamp. You can tap through the link in the show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/routine to sign up. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.